All right. So today I have the esteemed pleasure to welcome to our podcast Mr. Rob Hahn, the notorious Rob. So Rob is a no holds barred, pull any punch type of communicator on the real estate sector. I'm really privileged to have gotten to know Rob over the last few years and consider him a friend and a colleague in the real estate sector, and highly respect your views and your opinions because they are just that. They are well educated, well researched, well thought through pieces. And so you say what you think, but you're also not afraid to backtrack and say, well, I have new information. And so what I thought yesterday doesn't really apply today, but this is why. So would really love to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, and thank you for inviting me. And by the way, the feeling is entirely mutual because Lynette Kiowski is pretty damn amazing and speaks her mind as well. Although you do have a few more political restrictions, I think, on.
That's why I hang around with you. I'm hoping I can learn how to relax those a little.
It's really easy. You just get real comfortable with unemployment. Because I'm a consultant, so I wake up unemployed every day, and it is what it is.
Awesome. So Rob, just to kind of kick us off, again, you're relatively well known south of the border in a lot of different sectors, primarily in the real estate space, and all the different verticals that includes. But maybe lesser known in Canada. And I think the other piece is we're hoping that our podcast really fills a bit of a void on the commentary of the intersection between real estate, technology, and capital in Canada.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So we'll likely hit a wider target than just the real estate sector here as well. So we'd just love for you to share a little bit of your origin story, what your background is.
We could take the whole podcast for that, but so let's give you the Reader's Digest version. I'm a lawyer by training who decided that I don't like money, so I took a job as a magazine editor. But I knew the internet before there was an internet, so I started a company, which then I sold to USA Networks, went to work for Sci-Fi, left there, went to work at a startup. 9/11 happened, startup went down, went into the real estate industry, starting out in commercial real estate. So it gives me a bit of an interesting perspective. Worked at Realogy for 4 years, and then went to a small data company, and then went out on my own. And I've been doing strategy consulting since 2009.
Awesome.
So I've been unemployed since 2009.
Officially unemployed.
The other word for consultant really is like we are con men, so I don't know.
Yeah, but yet I seem to always see you with a high-end cocktail and a good meal. So
yeah, it's been good. It's been fun, and I stay in the real estate industry mostly, but obviously I have cross sections over into technology. Been doing more and more stuff with the finance world as I've started to, and we've talked about this before, and I've talked about it in presentations that I think we're entering kind of the age of capital. COVID, I think, is it's a bit of a curveball, so I'm thinking through a lot of those things as well. And like you mentioned, look, for whatever reason, I've been fortunate where I could just kind of speak my mind. Right. And that's good because I don't really know how to do anything else. I find it very difficult to say things I don't believe in. Right.
And I first of all, I wish more people would take that approach. But again, what I've always appreciated about your approach in that regard is that you do think through things and you do inform yourself. You rely heavily on, research and thought and really your connections. And this is where I'd love to kind of start to lean in. And you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned kind of your current thinking around, the age of capital. And I want to circle back on that and tie it into the whole conversation around COVID and how that's shifted. But where I'd love to lean into the conversation is, really around, your focus on connecting yourself with the people to learn the perspective. So your research isn't just, go and research papers and white papers and see what others are saying. it's literally connecting with the people on the ground, getting perspectives, connecting those dots. And it's what I've appreciated about your approach is it's a very practical approach. And so I'd love to hear from your perspective. And, you know, obviously the whole world has shifted over the last few weeks and it's impacted people across the board. I think, you know, more so than maybe any other time in history, it's categorically impacted the world. So I'd love to know from your point of view in these conversations you've been having, you know, what is the vibe out there? I mean, it's easy to say it's all dismal, but is it categorically dismal, or, you know, are there pockets of bright light?
So first of all, I appreciate kind of your praise. I'll take it. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes, I think, from the fact that, you know, I know people think I'm an expert, right? I think I'm an expert in some ways, but like the more you get to know something, I feel like the more you realize you really don't know anything, right? So look, I've never been a realtor, right? I've never sold real estate. My wife has, but you know, and I know things about business. I know things about business cycles. I know things about corporate finance. I know a lot of different things, but I try to be as humble as possible, if you will, right? Because, you know, what you said is true. Like I have strongly held opinions, but they're based on information and facts. If those change, I'm going to change the opinion and be like, I was wrong. I'm happy to be wrong, right? What I'm not happy about is people who just kind of do the PR and the spin and like, stop, you know, let's just start with the facts. And if we disagree, we disagree, and that's totally fine. So from that standpoint, I mean, when this thing popped, you know, I knew I had a certain perspective on what's going to happen, how things were going to be, but I'm not on the ground, right? I'm not a broker. I'm not an agent. I'm not seeing that. So the only way to correct that is to try and get that. Data helps, you know, so I try to, you know, look at all the showing time data. I try to look at MLS data. I try to look at all of the data. But I felt like early on, you know, the thing to do is to talk to agents, talk to people on the ground. Now, I took a very particular slant to this. So, by the way, I mean, I ended up interviewing 16 of the top agents and brokers that I could, you know, round up in a very short period of time. It just kind of, this was probably the second week in March. So it was, you know, right after, a lot of these lockdown orders started coming, and just kind of got their perspective on it. And I wrote a report based on that, and I'm modifying that report so it could be sent to the industry, because I wrote the report for the finance world, right? For investors. They appreciated it, but now I'm like, I'm going to modify it and actually do it for industry folks. So the thing that I'll say is, because I chose to speak to top producing agents and top brokers, the perspective I got was rather different. It's not dismal at all, right? I think it's actually a lot more positive and optimistic, which is why kind of my theory. So that's helped me think about what I think is going to happen based on their feedback. Now, if I'd spoken to just a wide cross section of real estate professionals, I might have a very different perspective on it. So I just want to caution that, like, everything is based upon folks who are really in the top 1%. You know, I mean, we're talking really big agent team leaders. We're talking about, you know, massive locally dominant brokerages, you know, people who are really smart, who really know what the hell they're doing. So that changes things.
Let me just poke on that a little bit, because it does come back to, I know, one of the theses that you've long held, and that is, you know, who really makes up the practitioner population, right? And, you know, so there are, correct me if I'm wrong, 1.4 million realtors
roughly
in the US, roughly 130,000, 140,000-ish up here in Canada. And you and I have had multiple conversations around, you know, what makes a realtor, which has a real brand behind it and needs to demonstrate some quality behind that to retain that trademark. And the difference between real estate agents or people that hold a real estate license. And so I just want to qualify that that's the conversation that we've had. So it's interesting to me when you say you've talked to the top 1% of agents, teams, brokers. Tell me why you took that tact as opposed to cross section.
My reasoning was, and this came out of the fact that I was starting to see some of the real early kind of survey results and pulses and so on. And people are like, this is disaster. And, you know, we're all going to go out of business and all of that. And I kind of feel like, you know, what exactly is the point of talking to an agent who does 3 deals a year? Because if they lose one, right, that 1/3 of their income is gone,
Right.
right? So, it was sort of like that. And again, you and I have talked about this many, many times. I'm fairly convinced that somewhere between 10 and 15% of the agent population does like 85% of the business. I'm fairly convinced of that. Now, it's interesting to me that we don't have any actual data behind this. I think it's driven by politics because MLSs don't want that information getting out, but it's out there. I mean, it's we all know it, right? If you're in the industry, you know it. So it's like, why are we talking about this? So given that, I just felt like if I want to know what's really happening on the ground, I need to talk to people who are doing the transactions.
Sure.
People are doing 400 or 500 transactions a year, not 4, right? So when the 400 or 500 people say we're going to lose 10%, 40 transactions, that's something.
Yeah.
Right.
So then tell me about this. So
Yeah.
thank you for clarifying that, because I think that's an important distinction in terms of why that was your sort of test population.
Yeah.
I think that's really helpful. So then tell me a little bit about what you learned through those conversations.
What I'm learning essentially is that the top producing agents, the top producing brokers, they're worried, they're concerned, but they are far more optimistic than they are pessimistic. They all think they're going to gain enormous market share through this.
So why?
Right.
Why is that?
Because they're better run, they have cash. And so that's the other part of this, right? And maybe this connects to the whole age of capital thing.
Mm-hmm.
Every single person I've spoken to, not every single, but just about every single one I've spoken to is like, we are just fine. We have more than enough cash. We've got lines of credit we can tap if we have to. They're not laying off staff. They're not cutting, they're cutting like the nice to haves.
Yeah.
Everyone is doing that. But these people are saying, listen, just give an example. I spoke to a broker in Atlanta who straight up said, if you are cutting staff, if you're laying off staff because of this, I'm going to eat you. I mean, that's basically what he said. I will come and buy you out. And if you don't want to sell to me, I'm going to take your market share. And his reasoning made perfect sense to me, right? Because now this is a gentleman who'd been through the last bubble, right? So 2008. So he remembers what happened, right? And what he says is, and this is the kind of stuff that I feel like you can only get by talking to actual practitioners on the ground. What he said essentially is, the hardest thing that you do as a real estate broker or a team leader is hiring people, right?
Right.
Because you have to hire the right person, then you have to train them up, get them in the culture, get them productive. It's like, that's the hardest thing you do.
It's a huge investment.
Right. The easiest thing you do is write checks.
Right.
So his thing was, I'm just not writing checks. I'm going to keep my staff, because when we come out of this, and we will come out of this, right? That's the other point that people need to understand. This was not a real estate problem. This wasn't a general the economy's turning sour problem. I mean, this was, economy was booming, right? I think we had the best first quarter potentially in history up until this hit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So this wasn't a real estate problem. This wasn't a demand problem. This wasn't an economy problem. This was a pandemic. And then the government reacted to the pandemic, and that's caused this cascade. So we're going to come out of this. And what these guys are all saying is, when we come out of this, I'm going to have all my staff. I'll be able to hit the ground running, while my competitors have to go and think about trying to rehire those people,
right,
who've now been out of work for 3 months or whatever. And oh, by the way, those people that you laid off, they resent the hell out of you.
So, this, and I actually don't want to go down this rabbit hole, because this could be a rabbit hole we go down. So what I'm going to do is, at the end of our recording, I will get you to tell people how to find you. But you just wrote a great piece around Open Door and their decision to have to let people go in exactly this vein, and what those implications might mean. And so, I'm going to encourage people to go and check out that piece, because I think it really, really nicely articulates kind of this point around hiring people. But you're absolutely right. This does provide a nice little segue into the conversation around, the age of capital and what this means, because I think 2 points out of what you just articulated really hit on my radar. One is, 2008 wasn't that long ago in memory for a lot of the people that are in the space.
That's right.
I think the difference, though, that you also highlighted is this isn't the economy going sour. So this is literally just a shut the lights off, and the economy is going to have to stop. almost essentially. And I know that I'm overemphasizing that, but it is, again, categorical, right? So I'm curious. One more thing that I wanted to weave in there. In 2008, we also didn't have this mass injection of capital into the real estate technology sector that we had experienced over the past 18 to 24 months.
That's right.
Talk to me about that and how that's a bit of a differential and how it can either benefit this sector coming out of this space, how capital is going to react to this, and does it help or hinder?
That's such a good question because, all right, so I'll try and answer it this way. I actually think that real estate technology is in deep trouble, with a few exceptions.
Okay.
So when we talk about all this capital that went into real estate tech, I mean, most of it is venture capital.
Yeah.
Right. And the problem with venture capital is that just by its very nature, venture capitalists invest in unproven companies. Otherwise, they don't need venture capital, right? I mean, they're proven. Like, what do you need venture capital for, right?
True. Yet they made a big play in that regard, right?
That's true.
There was a lot of bullishness around unproven technology.
That's true. So it's gonna. I think what's gonna end up happening. So let me try to answer the question first, and then kind of talk about it.
Sure.
I think it's going to help. No question about it, because we are moving into this new world, and it's who the hell knows what's going to happen, right? But right now, it's looking like we're moving into a world where society is finally leveraging a lot of this technology tools that we've had for a while. Like Zoom's not new, right?
Okay.
Internet telephony is not new. Slack is not brand new. It's just that because of this crisis, we're having to utilize it, right?
And they're there and they're available and they're
correct.
And they're widely enough known that they can easily proliferate. It has been
correct. So I do think that that's going to help in that sense. But on the other side of things, there are a lot of companies that started in the last 4 or 5 years, let's say. They're venture backed and they have a great idea and they need to prove it. Mm-hmm. I don't know that those guys will have the runway to prove it, right? So, and I'm basing that based on those interviews, those 16 people, right? Because again, these are real optimistic, aggressive, I'm going to take market share type people. Even they're saying, I've cut every sort of speculative technology product that does not have a clear ROI. Even those people are saying that, right? So they're keeping it if it has a clear ROI. In their mind, they can say, look at this piece of technology, say, this is generating 3x what I'm spending on it. They're keeping those. But hey, I wanted to try this new whatever AI, big data thing to see if it's going to work. All of that's getting cut. So, and I've heard from some of my friends and colleagues who are in the technology vendor space in residential real estate, mm-hmm. who are telling me things like all new orders have dropped off.
Interesting.
No more new orders. And all of their existing customers are calling them, asking for deferments or asking to renegotiate.
Yeah.
So we're not hearing that right now too much because let's face it, real estate tech is like this big, right? And no entrepreneur is going to come out and say, yeah, so our revenues are down 82%. This, I mean, nobody's going to do that, right? But it's stuff that I'm hearing. So on the flip side, there's a flip side. The bigger tech companies that have substantial capital.
CoreLogic, Zillow.
Right. Redfin. I used to count Opendoor in that mix, but with new information, I had to revise my opinion, right? This is an example of like, hey, I was wrong. I didn't have the information. Maybe companies like Compass, those guys are going to be such big winners out of this. It's actually, it's hard to wrap our heads around. And I think that's kind of where the industry is right now. Like everyone wants to sort of say, well, look, I mean, Redfin laid people off. So clearly it means that they're on their way out. I'm like, Redfin has like 400 million in cash. You don't, right? And they only laid off 7%. It's not, you got to look at the details.
I totally get it. But here's the question that I have is, if the proportion of it, so if I think about a Zillow or a CoreLogic, they're not going to venture capital. I mean, they're internally capitalized, great. And they're going to do well because they have the infrastructure, they have the market share, and they have the runway, to your point. Mm-hmm. So some of these so the companies that venture capital is engaged with may or may not. So,
Correct.
so how will this massive direction of capital into this space help the sector, not just through and survive, but where do you think the sector goes after this? Like, is
I think
this
this,
a watershed
yeah.
moment in some way, and is technology a piece of it, or is technology going to happen despite it?
I think the way I think about that is I don't think it's really all that worthwhile to talk about technology as some sort of a separate thing. And what I mean by that is every company is a technology company now. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I totally know.
yeah, yeah. So it's like talking about, well, this technology is going to be this. It's almost like saying, well, our office space is going to, it's like it's just part of the deal. Like you cannot be a company without technology.
Right. So really then the question, and this was a bit leading because
Yeah.
I wanted you to be able to, I wanted you to categorically say that, right?
Yeah.
That, capital, all of this VC money, whether it's VC money or whatever,
Or private equity or public funds or yeah.
Doesn't matter. I mean, the fact that it's being poured into the sector doesn't necessarily mean it's driving technology. So I'm curious.
No.
I'm curious from your perspective, where is this technology? Where is this? Is this capital still on the same trajectory, or is it going to be rediverted, drawn back? What's going to happen?
So nobody knows. let's just nobody knows.
Guess, a wild guess.
No. So I'm going to give you the wild guess. Like I said, I have opinions. I'm just pointing out nobody knows. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Ray Dalio. I don't care if you're, it doesn't matter to me. Like you could be the most successful venture capitalist in the world. Nobody knows because we're still in the midst of this government enforced lockdown, right? Yeah. So keep that in mind. And the capital markets are in turmoil right now. Okay? But my guess is this, when I think ahead, right? When I say, okay, say 2 years out, 3 years out, we're past this, something happens. What I kind of envision capital doing is I think we're going to see a massive restructuring of the industry and a massive wave of consolidation.
Okay, so
I don't know exactly. So again, right now, it is so cheap to buy companies because they're going bankrupt. So it's fire sales. So anybody that has capital right now, you have got to be like going, this is a buying opportunity like there's no tomorrow, right? If you have capital. And the issue is, do you have capital?
Right. So potentially this capital is, it's a short-term opportunity that's presented itself, which will allow capital to redivert, at least in the short term.
Yeah. So I kind of think of it this way. Remember when 2008 happened, right? Yeah. Blackstone and BlackRock and all these private equity funds all of a sudden say, hey, we can buy all these single family residences and turn them into rentals. I could see some smart fund managers going, hey, real estate's super fragmented because we know this, right? It's hyper fragmented. We think there's going to be a cleansing. We think that a lot of these companies they're selling for pennies on the dollar because they're cash crunch. Why don't we go fund a good company with really great management, give them 100 million and see if they could buy out 40% of the competitors, because then the economics change on the other side of that, right? So, I mean, I could see something like that happening. I could see tech companies just getting gobbled up. Yeah. Venture capitalists could be like, okay, we valued this startup at 25 million and gave them $2 million. They lost all of their customers, right? Like I said, new orders have dropped off a cliff, right? Old customers are saying, we want to renegotiate. Zillow comes on and says, we'll give you 2 million for that company. The investor going to go sell, right? I mean, they're like, get me out of this position. They don't care. They're just about, so I could see something like that happening. And then, to the extent that new technologies that are, I guess we'll call it transformative, right? I could see that actually getting a huge, so as an example, blockchain.
Yeah.
Right. Look, I think blockchain is 10 years out. I mean, who the hell knows, right? Because there's all these other things around blockchain. But is it a transformative technology? Of course it is.
Yeah.
Could some capital, some well-managed funds, look at that and say, hey, with all the turmoil going on in real estate, let's invest in blockchain, right? And throw 50 million at it, throw 100 million at it. The thing to keep in mind about this, by the way, this is something, I know your audience is more than industry people, but I do have to make this point. We in the real estate industry really have very little idea of what big capital is actually like, Right?
I would agree.
Like, we think like, oh my God, so-and-so company raised 20 million, oh, they're like this big new star now.
Yeah, yeah.
I've talked to fund managers where they're like, if the investment is not at least 500 million, we're not interested because it doesn't do anything for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you got to think bigger.
Yeah, I totally get it. And again, you and I have had that conversation,
Yeah.
and we're on that page. I think, relatively speaking though, when you look at this sector,
Yeah.
It's a baby in terms of capital and investment, and where big money actually flows, and the impacts that big money can really have, which frankly has always kind of blown me away, given just the asset class that real estate
Correct.
globally, right? And so,
Correct.
I think this is where, in general, the sector was feeling, pretty good coming into the pandemic, thinking, wow, the investment into our sector is finally starting to pick up, and starting to approximate the value of the asset class that we represent. And, this kind of hit. So it's going to be interesting, I think,
I agree,
to see where it goes.
Yeah.
One of the other notions that I know you have, sort of really been purporting over the last, number of months is, transformation of the industry and what that really looks like. And, are we, are we on that trajectory, and what's that going to look like? I've read a couple of your pieces lately, and I'd love to hear you articulate your view on what this is going to do to some of that transformative change that's already going on.
Sure. I mean, my theory on this is that what COVID does, what this pandemic does, is it just accelerates all the trends that were visible before that. So to give you an example, I think one of the biggest restructurings of the industry we will see is the agent teams will completely dominate residential real estate. So I'll step back. A lot of folks in the industry over the last 10 years or so, and even today, right, are still talking about, these big tech companies want to put real estate agents out of business. It's like, it couldn't be further from the truth. What they're going to do is empower select agents, and then have those agents put everybody else out of business.
And we've seen those examples like, Zillow's,
correct.
They're not their premier agent, but when they're selecting the agent teams to represent their
the Zillow offers, for example, right? But here's the thing, like, that's on the tech company. If you look at the ground level, at the local markets, what you're seeing is agent teams are increasing their market share before any of this happened by double digits every year, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the average realtor is doing like 7 transactions. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, so I'm saying,
right?
So that trend is already in place. What COVID does is now it says, do you have cash?
Right.
Agent teams have cash. A lot of agents don't, right? I mean, a lot of agents here in the US are applying for like unemployment insurance for the first time because of change. Like, okay, you're not going to come out of this and start investing and start, like, it's just not going to happen. So what does that do? I'm saying the restructuring now becomes, maybe we go from something like a 80-20 or 90-10 kind of deal to maybe it's like 98-2. I mean, that doesn't seem completely unrealistic to me. Maybe it's things like, I don't know. I mean, we could just go in so many different directions. But that fact right there, to me, that's the most important disruption that's come out of this. It's the most important trend that's been happening over the last 10 years in real estate. Everyone's been focusing on technology and CRM and all. It's like the big fundamental transformation over the last 10 years has been the rise of the agent team.
Right.
Right.
And again, I know that you've talked about that a lot, and really what that has, to your point, around COVID kind of accelerating some of these transformative changes. I think really what I'm hearing is across all sectors, cash is king, right? Cash is king. Whoever has cash, whoever has capital, right, at every level is going to be the winner out of this. And it's simply a waiting game, right? It's waiting this thing out, and who's able to finance the down period the best. That's right.
So everyone's like come to realize that, and that fact in turn then has consequences, because for 10 years we've had like the hottest real estate, like nonstop expansion, and brokers and agents, a lot of them just have kind of not realized the importance of cash flow. Like, look, I do consulting for a living, right? So I work with brokers often, and I'll get a broker call me, and then when I'll just, so what's your balance sheet? And like, I don't know.
I don't have one.
I mean, I think my accountant knows, right? And I'm like, really? So then I look at their balance sheet, and we're talking about some pretty sizable brokerages, with like over 1,000 agents. They have like 2 weeks of cash in the bank. And how do you operate? Like, you have 2 weeks of cash.
Yeah.
Well, we have, look at our accounts receivable. I'm like, yeah, but you can't pay the bank with accounts receivable, right? And what we're seeing is stuff like deals that were under contract fall out because the buyer lost his job. Now what?
Yeah.
Now that cash that you're expecting is not going to show up. Now what?
So do you think,
right? So it's things like that, right?
Yeah. Do you think this is, and I'm just watching the time here and irrespective of your time, and so we'll wrap up, but I have this one more question before we go there. Do you think this is really just an opportunity, and maybe a forced opportunity, for everybody across the sector to sharpen their pencil? Like, is this really about sharpening the pencil and deciding what is really important versus what we would like to have? And maybe starting to, and again, this divide in my mind has always been so massive, like the value of the asset class in the sector versus how sophisticated the sector looks at their own investments at every level, at the agent level, at the brokerage level, at the association level, and there's something very colloquial and unique around this industry of like-minded people, almost kind of that family approach and the competition approach versus there is massive opportunity to be had. Those that really want to get real. And do you think this is going to force the industry down that path?
I think so. But here's what is unknown right now. Okay. Because to me, one of two things will happen. Okay. One, we are going to, because of changes in psychology, changes in culture, changes in government, changes like in these big picture stuff. All of the things that we consider fundamental in real estate will no longer apply.
Give me an example.
We are going to just to give an example, the idea that relationships, right? I mean, real estate has exists for 100 years, talking about it's all about relationships. Relationship, right? We don't know if that's going to be the case going forward, because right now, all of us are living through this 24/7, 24/7 messaging that other people are bad for my health.
Being around other people are bad.
Right. Other people are bad for my health. Does that change how consumers react to this notion of relation? Like, I don't know, right? Nobody knows. No. Things like, the best way to sell a house, right, is, the traditional route. You find the agent, they go list it, and then buyers have a buyer's agent, and the buyer's agent brings those people. I don't know how many sellers are going to be wanting 50 strangers walk into their home going forward. I don't know, right? So either things are going to change like fundamentally, and we're going to have to look at restructuring the value proposition, the way things get done, et cetera, or they're not going to change, right? Because human beings don't like change. Yeah. So even consumers, once we're out of this will be a short-term little blip, and then we'll all forget about this a year from now, and things kind of go back to the way we've always done things. I actually don't know the answer to that. Nobody does. And anybody who claims to know, I'm just calling bullshit, because there's no way to know. Having said that, my opinion right now leans more towards the fundamental change side, because I think the thing that's changed the psychology, right? Okay. Like, yes, you're spending trillions. Yes, all of this is horrible. To me, the bigger impact is psychology. And it really reminds me of 9/11, right? That it was a one-day thing. You know what I mean? Like, we were attacked once, but the reverberations of that, the psychological change that's wrought in the American people and really globally, right? It's not like Canadians are not affected by it. It's been fundamental, right? So I kind of think we are going to see some real massive changes.
Interesting.
Right? And as the trends that have been going on accelerate, and then these real massive changes happen, the end result to me feels a whole lot like even more domination by the agent teams, even more domination by big, large, well-capitalized companies. I mean, 10 years from now, because right now, real estate is the kind of thing where it's like, there's no startup capital required, right? You just have to hustle and have a sphere. And
Right. That's right.
I don't know if that's going to be the case 10 years from now. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think, I think we actually already have seen that change, right? And
Correct.
you're
Trends.
Yeah, the trends, right? And so to your point, does this accelerate some of those trends? I think, that's going to be what's interesting to see is if it does and then how it does, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 last quick questions.
Yes. And I do want to leave this with a hopeful, upbeat note, by the way.
That's what I'm hoping. So here's my first question. Rob Hahn's predictions for the top 3 opportunities that come out of this.
Okay. Number 1, teams. Obviously, that should be obvious. Expand like crazy. Number 2, I actually wrote a post about this, and it's public, so you don't need to be a subscriber or anything. Go check it out. I really believe what this is going to do is the rise of the exurbs. Okay. It's something because, again, we have gone from a situation before COVID where you had to get in a car and drive to work, which meant that you wanted to live within a certain distance of your office.
Yes.
There are going to be a lot of jobs where you don't have to do that anymore.
Well, I think
or if you
already seeing that, right? A lot
Correct.
of people saying, why do I actually have to go to my workplace?
Correct. And almost more importantly, the bosses, the owners are saying, why am I paying $2 million a year for rent? Right? So if you no longer have to drive to work every day, even if you have to go into the office once a week, periodically, right? Now, all of a sudden, you can live 3 hours away. So you take major metropolitan areas like Vancouver, like Toronto, and you say, okay, now I can live 3 hours away. What does that open up? Right? It opens up some amazing properties on
Absolutely
acreage with beautiful, mountains and streams. Like,
it's almost the reverse urbanization.
Correct. But I think what in my mind, they skip the suburbs.
That's right.
You go from city to country.
To exurbs, yeah.
Correct. Yeah. I don't think, because again, and the way I think about it is I just, picture myself at 32, right? Newly married, have a young baby and a second one on the way, live to the city. Oh, it's so convenient. It's awesome. Restaurants, dining, culture. It's like, oh, we need to move somewhere. Well, we moved to the suburbs because I'm like, well, I have to be close to work.
That's right.
If I could have just telecommuted, I might be like, let's move 2.5 hours away where my backyard is like a mountain, not, 5,000 square feet or whatever, right? I think that's an opportunity that people are kind of missing out on. So what should I do? Well, if I'm an exurban real estate agent, I would start marketing in cities like crazy. If I'm an urban agent, I'm going to want to build some relationships with some people out in the exurbs, right? And say, hey, I might send you some clients. Can I get a referral? I mean,
I like that.
That's what.
I like
so
that.
That's opportunity number 2. Opportunity number 3. This is just real speculative, and it's just who the hell knows. But I think there's probably going to be a major opportunity around the MLS because the MLS systems are really old, really creaky, really ancient, and really bad.
So are we talking the MLS as the organization, or are we talking the MLS as the technology?
Well, let's put it this way. It's kind of neither. What I'm saying is real estate data.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if the organizations and technology do not support what the overall economy is going to need, and especially what these teams, these institutions that will come to dominate real estate, what they're going to need for their own purposes, then they get replaced. Right. So to me, the smart thing to do is get ahead of that curve, think through, what does someone like a Redfin actually need in terms of real estate data? Are we providing that? If we're not providing that, you're going to get replaced.
What is this new category of exurb real estate, and how do we really support that?
Correct.
We put in place to make certain that our agents are relevant,
Right. And so that's, the problem with that, why I'm kind of hesitant about it is because, this as well as anybody, we're steeped in tradition and we're steeped in existing infrastructure. We're steeped in this investment, which is emotional investment, that MLS and Associates talking about, we exist for the benefit of every single member. Really? I mean, you exist for the benefit of the part-timer who does one deal every 3 years? I mean, does that even make sense? Like, those tough questions are going to have to get asked. And my point is, if we're moving to an environment in the industry where we're going to have fewer, larger, more institutional, more professional companies, which I include agent teams in, kind of dominating, and you're not providing services and data and whatever they need, at some point, somebody is going to come in to fill that gap. Right. So I tell my clients who are MLS and associations, let's get ahead of that. Let's start thinking now about what they're going to need, and then what do we need to do in order to service what they need. And we'll see what happens. I think there's massive opportunity there, because if there is so just take Canada as an example, right? Because you guys are about 1/10 of our size and you're dominated by certain urban areas. If you could have a single real estate data / rules organization, what's the value of that organization? It's in the billions.
It's a lot bigger than even the sum of the collective today.
Correct. It's in the billions. Do you know what I mean? Like, that becomes one of the most important data companies in the world, because, like you had pointed out, the underlying asset class, right, is so valuable.
Yeah.
And giant multi-billion pension funds are making big bets based on that asset value. If there's a company that could say, we know everything there's to know about this asset class, that company is worth enormous amounts of money.
I love it. So, and you note how I didn't ask you what your predictions were, just where the opportunity.
That's right.
because
None of these are predictions, because nobody knows.
Opportunities is exactly because the opportunity has to be followed up by sort of that, the action has to be executed on. And
correct.
I would agree with you that, at least on your number 1 and 2, your number 1 and 3, 2 I hadn't considered, but it's a great one.
Yeah.
That there are massive opportunities that this opens up. And frankly, the period of time that we have is also unprecedented, where we actually do have a moment to catch our breath and really contemplate, where we're not in the midst of the hustle, right? And the cycle.
Right.
And I think that's a piece that people have either taken for granted or not recognized.
Right.
You don't have to hold your breath and wait. You can actually be productive during this time. And there's a lot of productivity about envisioning and imagining and putting all of those pieces in place for the eventual piece of time when we come out of this. And,
right.
That's the one thing that I continue to sort of support is, well, are we thinking about the world that we want to look, how we want it to look when we come out of this, as opposed to just waiting to see how it's going to look?
I mean, I would agree with that, but I would just add one other thing, right? Because this has been a consistent theme of most of my presentations, and a lot of my writing. What I think a lot of folks in the industry want, what the world that they want, is the world that we had. Yeah. In other words, they want to defend this shock. They want to be like, oh my God, this COVID thing happened, pandemic shut down. Let's just survive it. Let's just defend against it.
Had it not happened, we were already going to be so amazing over here.
Correct. So they just want to go back to what we had. And I think my point is, what would be much better is that concept that I talked about in Toronto, for example, anti-fragile, right? Nassim Taleb's thing. Like, it's not enough to just resist the disruption, resist the change, and then say, we're going to stay the same.
Right.
What we actually want to do is this change, this shock, this disruption lets us get better, improve in whatever way that is, however you think of it, right? Improve. So it's like the old way was pretty great, but it could have used improvement, right?
Always.
So is there a way to get that for whatever your perspective? So if you're a traditional 70-30 split broker, who I happen to think is in deep trouble, but you look at this and say, listen, does this opportunity, does this crisis give us the ability to go to 50-50 split brokers somehow? Explore that then, right? Just whatever it is, think about how do we improve as we come out of this, not just how do we get back to the good old days of the way things were. Like that would be the one thing I would say.
I agree. And I thank you for making that point, because I 100% think that is the missing piece that a lot of people are going to regret looking back on this piece of time is, did we think creatively enough about how to move out of this, even if we liked where we were?
Right.
That it gave us the moment to take a breath, right? To
Right.
take a breath and really consider, is there an opportunity to do better? So I appreciate that. Okay, last question for you.
All right.
I hear from today, you are on Inman stage, you're at Realtor Quest in Toronto, you're on any stage. What are you talking about?
The fact that I'm there, because it means the physical conferences are back.
Good point. And are you missing those?
I mean, look, I don't miss the travel, but I do miss seeing friends. You know, like it was such a pleasure to see you at the OREA event. You know, it's such a pleasure to. So there, I mean, that part I do miss. A year from now, what am I talking about? You know, I hope I'm talking about you know, all the things that we just kind of mentioned and how we're starting to see it come true, right? How we are seeing a wave of consolidation, right? How we are seeing. We went through an incredibly painful period.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, and jobs were lost and things were restructured, not to mention the lives that were lost, right? I mean, it is a real tragedy what this disease is doing to the world, right? But having said that, hopefully I'm talking about, but look at all this amazing opportunity coming out from innovators and people who are adapting, and real estate is filled with those people.
Totally.
You know? Like, I don't want it to seem like real estate is like all conservative. No, it's filled with innovators. It's filled with people who are always asking, how can I make this better? How can I provide a better experience? How can I do those things? So hopefully we're talking about that.
Cool.
You know?
Love it. I love it. Thank you so much, my friend.
You're so welcome. Like I said, thanks for having me.
Before we close off, I'd love for you to let people that are listening know where to find you, where to find your work. Rob has a ton of amazing comment and commentary.
Yeah. The best place is my blog, Notorious Rob. You could Google it. I finally have started ranking above this rap blogger who is also named Notorious Rob. So I'm now ranking above him. But you know, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter.
I will put all of your handles and the link to your website in the show notes when we post.
Sure. All right.
Well, appreciate you so much. Take good care.
Appreciate you. See you, Lynette. Stay healthy.
Yes, you too.